What?
Yeah.
Then
Have
you're
an idea, or
not
should I
talking.
call something?
No, I'm just thinking.
What should have been nothing more than a funny, out-of-context clip has now blown way out of proportion, sparking a debate around one of the greatest coaches in the game, and Falcons lodging a formal complaint against Blast. It might be one of the most ridiculous stories in Counter-Strike this year. So how did we even get here? Falcons versus Virtus Pro isn't exactly an El Clasico matchup, but it ended up being one of the more intense series we've seen this year. An over 4-hour best of 3 with 2 maps going to overtime, 2 blown leads by Falcons, and a win that resulted in Electronic popping off on Dexter.
That'll do nicely, VP Tenacious! And they got a lot to say about that one. On the ropes, battered, bloody, down 12-5.
However, the actual results or the match itself isn't what people are talking about. You see, during a break, Blast played some voice comms from Falcons from map 1 during a tactical timeout. And in it, Coach Zonic kind of seems to just trail off mid-sentence, which leads Nico to ask, what the is the plan, buddy?
I don't know. I just feel like last round was obviously a bit unlucky, but
What?
yeah.
Then
Have an
you're
idea, or
not
should I
talking.
call something?
No, I'm just thinking.
The Blast Twitter account then tweeted out this very clip, leading to a ton of different reactions and a pretty messy conversation. Now, first off, for those of you who might not know what happened or why it's an issue, in CS2, when a coach calls a tactical timeout, you probably want them to say something of value, especially when you're the Falcons and are in the process of blowing an 11-4 lead. Now, that's not always the case. Sometimes coaches call for a timeout to reset or calm emotions, which is perfectly reasonable. But in this case, it didn't seem like that was the type of call Zonic was trying to make, since it felt like he was starting to say something but then lost his train of thought, which is exactly what was discussed by Freya, Pimp, and NBK on the desk right after the clip aired. Pimp thought that maybe Zonic had something in mind but couldn't get the right words out, so just decided saying nothing was better. At the same time, NBK and Freya argued that if you're going to call a timeout, especially in that circumstance, you're gonna have to say something, even if it's just some reassurance. Instead, Zonic kind of froze, and Nico, who was probably already frustrated given the circumstance of the map, got a little bit snippy. Not really a big deal as an isolated incident, but also not a great look for Zonic given the pressure that he's under to lead this team, and the history of success that he's had that now looms over him like a shadow. Which is why I'm not too surprised that his haters jumped into the comments to drum up the fraud accusations. Many deem Zonic to be the greatest coach in Counter-Strike history, having been part of the 4-time major winning Astralis roster and adding a 5th major with his time leading Vitality. However, given his lack of success with the several iterations of Falcons, his detractors argue that maybe he was carried by the skill of that Astralis roster or ZywOo rather than his own competence as a coach. I think that's a little crazy to say. I don't think you can fluke your way to 5 major wins, but hey, it was to be expected to see this type of shit in the replies. The Falcons haven't been doing well, and with the addition of Nico, one of the most celebrated players in the game, things haven't gotten much better, and people are starting to point fingers. Also didn't help that Russian CS personality Overdrive allegedly called Zonic the most overrated figure in Counter-Strike after their loss and exit from this event. Still, several people came to Zonic's defense, including Apex, who said that Zonic helped him become the player he is today and puts insane work into his teams. On the other hand, Nico also seemingly responded, saying, LOL. Now I thought that would have been it, but this shit got even more messy because those weren't the only types of responses to Blast's post. We also saw Team Liquid's coach Mither ask the question, quote, why would you share this? And G2's coach Taz sarcastically say, quote, definitely what our community needs. And in response to that, some argued that it was actually good for Blast to post this type of BTS content. And this actually sparks a pretty interesting conversation. First off, I will say that on top of this clip being very out of context, Blast sort of obfuscated Nico's quote by just putting call something, when the entire quote is actually, do you have an idea or should I call something? Much less antagonistic and also a question rather than a statement. On top of that, based on Mither and Taz's replies, it's shit like this that probably makes players and orgs less likely to give access like this in the future. It's an extreme circumstance, but if players don't want their voice comms recorded and posted, they might not want to go to these events in the future. At the same time, I do understand why people want this level of access and transparency from these teams. It's led to us getting a ton of great moments over the years. Regardless, this drama didn't die here with this interesting conversation, because rather than attempting to just move on as quickly as possible, Falcons decided to make it 10 times worse for themselves. Because the org announced that they were submitting a formal complaint to Blast for posting this out-of-context clip as, quote, bait. Honestly, already kind of embarrassing to drag this out even more than it needs to, but to make matters worse, it drew a response from caster Scrawny, who alleged that Falcons have also lodged complaints to TOs regarding casters who have said certain things about the org. If true, that would be a pretty bad look. An already unpopular org essentially asking for special treatment, though Scrawny did follow it up by saying that they aren't the only culprits of this. Thankfully, that's where this whole clusterfuck of a situation seems to end for the time being. Once again, what should have been a slightly amusing clip turned into a firestorm, so par for the course for this community, I suppose. Overall, I want to know what you think. Are people reading too much into this clip? Is Zonic actually a fraud? And what are your thoughts on TOs having access to this type of stuff from these orgs? I only have nice things to say about everyone all the time, so it's not really an issue for me, but I would understand why other people might be like, maybe don't record me when I'm in my most like vulnerable, frustrated, emotional states, right? Because it can lead to shit like this.